the Pile on a Midwest College Football podcast. I am actually joined by Clinton Boring this time after he so rudely left us for the last hour of the show. And we're also joined tonight, joining the elite pantheon of repeat guests on Inside the Pylon. Jack Soble from Blue and Gold Illustrated of the On3 Network joins us to break down the Notre Dame half of the inaugural 12-team college football playoff game, the Battle of Indiana, this Friday night in South Bend, Indiana. Jack, thank you once again for joining us this evening, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and thank you guys for having me on. It's been a busy couple days here in South Bend. We talked to Marcus Freeman, and I believe 10 players were made available on Sunday, which they're treating Sunday like Monday and so on and so forth because the game's on Friday. And then today we got the coordinators, offense, defense, special teams. Tomorrow we're getting Pete Bavakwa, the athletics director, to talk about a number of things that I presume includes Marcus Freeman's contract extension. And then Wednesday we get Freeman again, and then Thursday's the game. So very busy, but it's what we signed up for, and wouldn't trade for anything right now.
Yeah, you could be covering the Tony the Tiger Bowl again this time of year. I'm sure this is probably a little bit better than that.
Yeah, I didn't even get to go to that either. We didn't have the budget to send both of us.
That sucks.
Yeah,
don't have to worry about it this time. Just to hop on over to the stadium. Clinton, thank you for taking some time for us, sir. How are you?
I'm good, man. Bedtime. Children. If you have children, listeners, a little bit off tonight. Indiana, our guy Sammy also wanted to go a little bit early, so it was a little early for me with bedtime, but then bedtime took longer than I thought. I thought I was actually going to be able to get on for 15 minutes of the show, and then I made it in time for Jack, though. I was very confident I would be able to make the 9 o'clock start. So here we are. I'm ready. I'm excited for this weekend. I know you're excited because you're going to the game, and then I got my tickets to the Ohio State game, so I'm excited for that. And Jack, we had some really breaking news that we just read on Twitter. Clemson actually took a transfer in the transfer portal. The sky may be falling, but they took a transfer.
The great Southeast Missouri State. Yeah. Go Redhawks, I believe. They were. I'm a Mizzou grad, and they were our FCS punching bag a couple of years, so kind of grew attached to them.
Hey, Dabo had to take one. Why not go to the FCS level and do it?
You could have given me 100 guesses, and I wouldn't have gotten Redhawks there. So I'm glad to know that there's some backstory there, and it's not just like some bar trivia that's sitting in the back of your brain. Like, actually, I got this one.
Well, they made the tournament in some crazy Ohio Valley championship, and me and my buddies were watching random college basketball, and we saw SEMO on, and we're like, you know what, hell yeah, go SEMO. We've seen them a couple times.
Oh, that's so funny. So I'm curious, before we kind of get started talking about this game, Jack, just your perspective on the season as a whole, because I mean, I don't have to ask you the pulse on the fan base because I know the pulse of the fan base, but you've experienced this season, the same season I did, but I guarantee in a wholly different way. I experienced the ups and the downs of this season. What's just being on the beat, going from quite literally the highest of highs of the Marcus Freeman era, beating Texas A&M on the road week 1, to a week later doing the thing that they literally could not do, that you said, and I quote, on our preseason preview episode, you can't lose to a MAC team at home. And they did that thing, only to come back with 10 straight wins and qualify still for the college football playoff and hosting the first ever college football game on Friday.
Yeah, it was obviously interesting on September 7th, and I feel like in the week following that, you, as a beat writer, you could have believed one of two things. You could have believed that everything we thought we knew about this team was wrong, because I think all of us thought this was a playoff team and with the potential to do some more than that, or that they were still that team, and I think they showed that against A&M, and they just lost their minds for a week. And I was in the latter camp, but I wasn't convinced that they wouldn't lose their minds again, because I didn't pick them to lose any game through the rest of the season in our weekly picks, but you could never rule it out, because you couldn't count this team out from letdowns. And I think at a certain point, maybe in week 9 when they beat Navy or when they killed Florida State and they smacked them, you start to think maybe this team would be beyond that, and they wound up doing it. And I think it is a noticeable shift from Marcus Freeman that we've seen, but both in the way he's spoken to us, Like he was like, let's get this out of the way. Like he was downright depressed when he talked to us for a few weeks, even after they killed Purdue. Like for a few weeks after NAU, but slowly but surely he started warming back up. And I think like he realized when he's coaching the team, one of the big mistakes he identified against A&M was like they made mistakes in that game, and there were red flags on tape that they believed the win masks those, and they were not able to mask them again against NIU. So their mindset after every win is like, how can we get better? How can Notre Dame fix the mistakes? Even in a 52-3 win against Florida State, Mark, or in that 40 whatever the score was against Army, like Mark, the first thing Marcus Freeman talked about was like they couldn't score in the red zone a couple times. So I think that mindset is what really this being greedy, this never satisfied mindset that they really adopted after NIU is really what has allowed them to get to this point.
Well, it's so funny now too, because like no one's ever had a bad day of practice, right? You meet with him on Thursday. It's, oh my God, we had the greatest week of practice this week. We were so locked in and ready to go. And they have the Peacock documentary on, and the new episode that came out was the week of the Northern Illinois game, and it's the Tuesday practice, I think it was. And he's like talking to the team, and he's like, I don't know what went wrong today, guys, but it was not a good day of practice, and we'll watch the tape and we'll get it fixed. And it's just so funny to go look back at that in retrospect, because it's like, oh, maybe the writing was on the wall there. But the question I wanted to ask to you in regards to Freeman is, what change have you seen with him just as like his persona this year? Because I think like through his first 2 years, I don't know how to describe his demeanor with like the media or on the sidelines, but it felt very, I don't want to call it lackadaisical, because I think that gives off a negative tone, and that's not what I'm trying to imply here. But he didn't seem as intense as he seemed this year. Like he seems like that loss to Northern Illinois fundamentally changed him as a person, and he's been like angry since then, almost.
No, I think you're right. It's like it kind of goes back to what I said about not ignoring red flags because they won. And I was actually, when you started talking about like everyone says it's a good day of practice, I was going to point to that clip that, because I watched that episode too, and like it's in A&M week, it's in the A&M game. Like there were red flags that Freeman and the coaching staff overlooked because they won that game, and they thought, all right, we won that game. There's no one on, like they thought they were going to be favored, and they were right that they were going to be favored against every other team on their schedule. And they ignored the red flags during NIU week, because you can guarantee after that week, Freeman would have been on their like can I cuss here?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Freeman would have been on their asses for a bad Tuesday practice after that week. That's the biggest change in Freeman. Like you mentioned the intensity, like yes, but it's also the attention to detail. I think in this program has gotten a lot better. And again, I'll point back to that Army game where they played a near perfect football game on defense, except for when like the subs came in and gave up a touchdown at the end, or except for they gave up one touchdown drive to Army with that, and they committed a few penalties that were unnecessary. And even though they put on a triple option defense clinic, all the defense could talk about after that game was the penalties. They can't give up that drive. So it's that kind of mindset of being greedy that I think is really driven the way that they've played. The other mindset that I think has been really helpful is like, even though they've had everything to lose every week since NIU, they've played with nothing to lose. And I think Rhett Leonard is the best example of this. I asked him like, what does this win mean to you after the USC game? And he's like, man, I had so much regret after NIU. Like he was so hesitant that day. Like he had open guys, he just wasn't throwing him because he didn't trust them, or he didn't trust himself, or the scheme, or whatever. He just didn't trust it. After that, he's like, I'm gonna let it rip, and whatever happens, happens. And I think that helped them beat USC. That helped them get to where they are now.
So you mean it's certainly possible after a team loses to leave it all out there and play loose and not have their butts pucker up when times get tense? Huh. I wonder what that's like, because that's still a lot of tension here in Columbus, not so much about South Bend. So on the front of Marcus Freeman, though, like we go back to that Northern Illinois game, and you tell yourself, right before the playoff game, Marcus Freeman's getting a nice extension and a nice big payday. How's that going to go for you? I could tell you personally from watching Ryan talk after the NIU game, he was ready to axe Marcus Freeman off as we donned him Marcus Freeman with his MAC opponent losses. But what's kind of the vibe of the beat writers, the fan base, the 80s and staff with this extension of Marcus Freeman?
It's the right move. It is absolutely the right move, and I think everyone on the beat agrees. Which is why we were really confused that like they didn't send out an actual press release. They announced it on NBC, and they sent a statement to anyone who asked for it. But we had to ask them for the statement. It was a weird rollout, but they did exactly what they had to do. And I think my colleague Tyler Horka wrote a good column. It's like, now is the right time to do it. After the regular season, when everyone agrees Marcus Freeman has done a great coaching job this year, you get it out of the way. Now the only thing you focus on is the playoff. And also you're not extending him after a loss, which may have left a bad taste in some people's mouths. So I think it was the obviously correct move. You can't let a coach go into the last 2 years of his contract in current day college football. It's just not something that happens, especially at a school like Notre Dame. Rewards Freeman for a good job. It's a commitment to reportedly commitment to increase staff salaries across the board, and he's done a really nice job with his coaching staff on a multitude of hires. And it's the right move at the right time, and I don't think anyone here is really disputing that.
Well, we can certainly now, Ohio State fans who are tuning in, we can put to rest the idea that you thought Marcus Freeman was going to leave Notre Dame to take Ryan Day's job, which is not even open. That was also the talk here, Jack. It's been crazy times, man. Crazy times.
Clinton always making it about Ohio State.
Well, I have to address the elephant in the room with everyone who said Marcus Freeman is going to be Ohio State's next head coach. But here we are. Ryan, how do you want to lead off breaking into the game? Well, you're the one going to it, so lead us off.
Yeah,
into
man. The funny thing about kind of the discourse around these playoff games heading into it, when everyone thought that somehow, some way, Alabama was going to make the playoff or Georgia was going to lose in the SEC title game and they'd end up on the road in the first round, is whether this, whether that. These Southern teams come up and playing cold weather games, and naturally you get two Indiana teams playing a first round game against each other. In terms of like, I keep peeking at the forecast, and I mean it's going to change 900 times between now and then, but it looks like maybe a little bit of snow during the day, but definitely going to be cold and maybe a little slick on the playing surface and windy on Friday night during the game, which my initial thought goes to, well, that probably helps Notre Dame more than Indiana, because Notre Dame doesn't have a downfield passing game, and Indiana, that's a big part of their offense. But looking at this Hoosiers defense, Jack, like they played pretty well this year. And even in that Ohio State game, I mean, we're talking about two special teams plays and a garbage time touchdown that turned the tide of that game. How do you envision Mike Denbrock scheming up this offense, knowing that, hey, maybe weather's going to be a factor, but hey, also this is probably the best defense that they've played since, God, I don't even know when. Louisville? Nah, I don't know about A&M. Maybe Louisville, but it's certainly a challenge that they haven't had to face the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think if I were Mike Denbrock, I'd play Notre Dame's game until Indiana can stop it. I know Indiana's run defense is great, and I actually think you mentioned the special teams mishaps against Ohio State. I feel like that while I watched that whole game, I felt like it was kind of a lights were too bright situation for Indiana, that they might benefit from being in that before they go to the playoff. So I don't think it will be quite that lopsided in this game. But if I were Mike Denbrock, like, your identity that's worked the whole year is three-pronged rushing attack with Riley Leonard, Jeremiyah Love, Jadarian Price. A slick playing surface is typically helpful for teams with really good run games because it's really hard to get tackling angles. It's hard to get tackling angles on Jeremiyah Love anytime, but especially when the playing surface is slick. So I would try to run the ball. The offensive line is playing really, really well right now. Indiana is really good at pass rushing when they get into obvious passing downs. Like Mikhail Kamara, I think it's pronounced, is a player I have a lot of respect for. He's been fantastic this year. probably the best D lineman they faced since Ashton Gelati against Louisville. If I recall correctly, they handled Gelati pretty well. The offensive tackles, Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner, are playing some really good football right now. And again, the whole offensive line's playing well. They have the ability to run the ball even against an Indiana team that's going to stack the box and make them throw downfield. And I feel like there's no reason to stray from that unless you have to. I will say what they have done is go heavy on the RPOs when they face a team with a great run defense, or not great. When they face a team with a good run defense and a bad pass defense, they went pass heavy early against Stanford, because Stanford had like a top 20 run defense at the time and a bottom 20 pass defense. So they'll do that, but then they'll do that to soften defense and set up the run. Their goal is to run the ball. It's just a matter of how they get there, and I don't see that changing.
Yep. So on the front of the triple-pronged running attack, for those who don't follow Notre Dame as closely, Jeremiyah Love, full go?
100% full go. We received word at Blue and Gold probably the day after that there may have been some initial concern, but the MRI showed no structural damage. He's good to go.
Perfect. And then certainly looking from at the Indiana offensive side and the Notre Dame defensive side, we go back to the Ohio State as well as the Michigan game. Indiana really struggled with the defensive lines from those teams, and most notably in Ohio State, just pass rush pressure to begin with, because that was really a game that Ohio State kind of opened up blitzing linebackers and more stunts versus just rushing for. And obviously we know what Michigan has in Grant and Graham, who are two top 10 locks essentially in this year's draft. Kind of confidence-wise with Notre Dame's defensive line heading into this game, and then can we trust Notre Dame's pass defense if Indiana has somehow taken the time to find out how to scheme around their shortcomings against great defensive lines?
It's interesting because I thought the defensive line was probably the main problem against USC and why Jaden Mayava kind of diced them up. I think Al Golden, who will always be the first to blame play calling when the defense gives up points, did so again earlier today. He said like they didn't go to their changeups enough. Like they're a very heavy blitz single high man team. He felt like they didn't go to their zone changeups enough against USC. But like you said, Indiana has struggled against the blitz, and I think that's what they come out and do early. As far as the D line goes, I think last game was the first time they really felt the loss of Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore, who are their probably two best edge rushers, who they both lost to long-term knee injuries earlier in the season. They were both playing some really good football. But in the middle, they have Howard Cross and Riley Mills, and Howard Cross will be back. He missed the last 3 weeks with an ankle injury, so that is the closest Indiana's going to see. They're not as good as Grant and Graham, but it's the closest Indiana's going to see to Grant and Graham. Those two have to dominate for Notre Dame to make any kind of playoff run, including this game. And then beyond that, I think they try to go heavy off the edge, like Ohio State did. Because I watched Curtis work in that game. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Clint, but like it seemed like he tried to spin out of pressure, and then Ohio State just had guys waiting for him.
Yeah,
like they ran some of those delays that really confused him. So I would expect Notre Dame to kind of go to that.
Yeah, and then because of the pressure, I mean, in that game specifically, Indiana had guys open. He just didn't have time to get it there. And you're right. He would step away, and it didn't matter. There's another guy in his face as soon as he moved. And that was kind of the thing with the Michigan game, too. I think they averaged 0.72 yards per play against Michigan in the second half. I mean, they virtually did nothing. Now, some of that was aided by there were multiple drops in that game by receivers, especially early on in the first half, that didn't help the offense. But I think Rourke's a really good quarterback when he has time, and we can say that about any quarterback, right, who doesn't throw better when they're not under pressure. But that was the first time all year, given their lower strength of schedule, that they really had to face at a defense that attacked them in that way and on the road, which is what they're going to get in this game with a defense who's really good, and they're on the road. So Cignetti's a great coach. I think at some point, and Ryan and I have talked about this through the season, the G5 talent that you brought is great and has gotten you to this point. But at some point, that Power 4 talent and those 4 or 5-star talents are going to kind of take over the game, and you're just going to outlast you.
Yeah, no, that's certainly possible. I know I have Notre Dame winning this game by double digits, but not that much. I think I have Notre Dame by 10.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just a matter of like the Ohio State game was a matter of can they stay out of third and long situations, and you can say this about any game for any team, but especially an Indiana team that does really well when it can run the ball, get to second and six, third and two. Then Curtis Rourke has time against D linemen who can't pin their ears back and rush and find Elijah Surratt and some of those back shoulder throws or the slants or some of the stuff that they like to run. I know they also like to use a lot of mixed direction. That works pretty well for them. Some of their RPO stuff is impressive, but if Notre Dame can get them into some third and longs and force negative plays, I think that's when Al Golden really brings out the best in what he does schematically. And I mean, obviously, it would be nice for Notre Dame if they had their two best edge rushers, but I still think they can scheme up enough pressure to really put Rourke in a bundle.
Well, well, Jack, you did touch on it, and Clinton, you made an interesting point regarding Indiana, and you're finally getting a test against something, and that kind of maybe alters your overall perception on a team. And the question I have for you, Jack, is the Notre Dame pass defense. It's kind of been a chicken or the egg argument this year. Is it, the nation's best pass defense that's making these other teams that they're playing have worse overall statistics because Notre Dame just dominated them so badly? Or has Notre Dame's pass defense benefited by playing some crappy quarterbacks and wide receivers and two option teams? And as always, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And you touched on the not having Howard Cross against USC was obviously a huge detriment because you're already thin on the defensive line. Now, arguably one of your three best players still healthy is not playing in that game. You're not getting pressure on Jaden Maeva, and he had a field day on this Notre Dame secondary in the second and third quarter, which is, I mean, really the only time this year that's happened. Tyler Shuck made a couple of incredible throws, but I don't think that there was anything necessarily in that game where you'd sit there and look, oh man, they really got him good on that one. I think he made like one touchdown pass when Drake Bowen absolutely annihilated him to the back of the end zone, and they had an incredible throw to Ja'Cory Brooks in the end zone over Leonard Moore. But Christian Gray had a pretty tough game until he didn't have a tough game against USC. But having that tape for Al Golden and then 3 weeks to kind of diagnose and see maybe what went wrong, and you touched on it a little bit too in terms of the play calling, but what adjustments do you think that they will look to make or can make in the defensive game plan to, I don't want to say necessarily shelter the cornerbacks because that's just not what they do. They're going to go and put them out there on islands and say, look, kid, sink or swim. You got to put that last play behind you. But at least from maybe like disguising, your coverage or disguising where you're sending rushers from or stunting a little bit differently on the line to mix up the Indiana offensive line and try to get Curtis Rourke off his game early.
Yeah, I think you said, and going back to that Louisville game, like what people forget about that game is that Notre Dame fumbled twice inside their own red zone, both of which led to Louisville touchdowns. Other than that, the defense was fantastic in that game. So yeah, USC is the first time they were really hurt, especially through the air, and I think it is really gonna be a matter of Al Golden going to some of those changeups. Like it took too long for Notre Dame to realize like the trouble Christian Gray was in and the game he was having against USC. Because on the other side, Leonard Moore was thrown at 10 times and he gave up 2 completions. He's going to be, I think, thought of as one of the best cornerbacks in the country by the end of the 2025 season. But Gray's also a fantastic player, and I think it took them too long to realize he just didn't have it. Then it seemed like there were some miscommunication issues in the secondary that is obviously uncharacteristic of them. So I think you're right, and you said it. Like the fact that it happened, now Golden can tell them, and they can tell themselves like, all right, we got beat. Now what do we do about it? I think it will in the long run be good for them to have that happen. A, in a game that they won, and B, before the playoff, so they have it on tape and they can make the adjustments necessary. Because I think USC, like you said, they were fantastic, but they were slaying a lot of bums, and I think USC putting that on tape and reminding them what they need to work on and giving them that evidence of what they need to work on before December was pretty valuable for them.
we touched a little bit on, I mean, we didn't really touch on it, but we vaguely mentioned the Indiana special teams miscues against Ohio State and how that kind of turned the game on its
Stole
head.
my question, Ryan.
Well, so when I was talking to Sammy last hour, I asked him 3 keys to what would be needed for an Indiana win, and he deliberately went out of his way to mention special teams, and he went out of his way to mention Notre Dame has blocked 6 kicks this year. They have been a force blocking punts and blocking field goals this year. However, Notre Dame has their own issues with field goal kicker. I don't remember the exact date, Jack, that Mitch Jeter last made a field goal, but it's been far too long.
I believe it's the Florida State game, which would have been early November, I think.
Okay. And he didn't really look all that great against USC either, though he looked pretty good running down the one kick, so at least the groin's probably doing a little bit better. But then Tyler's putting out videos today of him shanking kicks, and I'm sure he's in his own head and everything right now, but how do you view the special teams in this one? Because it hasn't gotten them yet, but it feels like at least the people that I talk to, we've been saying for a month and a half now that, well, eventually this kicking game is going to cost them.
Go into the kicking game. I do want to touch on the blocks because I think that's been a very underrated and frankly really cool storyline of this Notre Dame season. Let me introduce you guys, if you're not aware, to Bryce Young. Not that Bryce Young. This Bryce Young is like 6'7", 260. He is the son of Hall of Fame defensive lineman and Notre Dame All-American Bryant Young. He's a freshman. He had a monster senior season out in Charlotte. And he came in and he was like, what do I got to do to get on the field? And they put him on a lot of special teams units. Like, can you imagine being a kickoff returner and seeing 6'7", 260-pound Bryce Young, who I swear to God is always the first guy down the field?
Yeah, he killed someone in that Purdue game.
Greatest plays I've ever seen. Like, that press box was as soundproof as any press box I've ever been in. We both heard the smack and then the gasp of the crowd when that happened. And not to mention, he's also blocked 3 kicks because he's 6'7". So, like, he's been like an ace up their sleeve on special teams, and I think he's going to make a difference in the playoff. But on Notre Dame's own kicking game, yeah, I mean, whatever he did in practice wouldn't have really mattered unless we saw him kick 7 field goals. He made 5 of them. Unless he missed all 7, it wouldn't have really mattered. It's a mental thing for him. Like, as far as we know, like, by all accounts, the groin or hip or whatever he hurt is fine. Like, it's a mental hurdle of getting back to where he is. Marcus Freeman said he's been great in practice, and he's as close to himself as we've seen. But he also said that after the Army game, and he missed a chip shot against USC. So it's a problem, but it's also a problem that goes deeper than Mitch Jeter, because one of those misses in the Army game was blocked. And when asked about it, Freeman emphatically said, like, you can tell when Freeman is just saying something to protect his player, and when when he really means it. Like, he really meant it when he said that was not Mitch Jeter's fault. That is a protection issue that we have to get fixed immediately. So it's a problem that runs deeper than Mitch Jeter, and obviously they have to fix it before it costs them a playoff game. There's nothing they can say or do to convince us that it is fixed until they show it on the field.
And then kind of rolling off, we've had defense, offense, special teams. I want to talk about Curt Cignetti, the opposing coach, who also got a nice payday for the Indiana Hoosiers. Ryan and I are kind of familiar with what the rest of the Big Ten fan base vibes are with Mr. Cignetti, who is a very confident coach, walking into his opening presser of Purdue sucks, Michigan sucks, and so does Ohio State. I believe the last time, I think I read to Ryan before the show, was it 1991 that the last time these two teams played?
That is correct.
So probably not a whole lot of action, or I think time that Notre Dame fans spend looking down towards Bloomington. But what is kind of the vibe of how people feel about Curt Cignetti as he comes into this matchup with Notre Dame on Friday?
Notre Dame fans hate the guy. Like, our message board at least love those guys, but they can take the most not benign, but like the most not a shot at Notre Dame, just hyping up his own team quote and turn it into like, we despise you and everything about you. And so that was the case when he went on, I think this is the Big Ten championship pregame show on CBS, and was like, we should get a home playoff game. Notre Dame lost, like, so and so lost to this team, so and so lost to this team. Notre Dame lost to NIU. Indiana should get a home playoff game, and like he's just lobbying. It's not personal, but Notre Dame fans have somewhat predictably taken the confidence of Curt Cignetti and run with it. And I get it. Like if I were a Notre Dame fan, I'd probably feel the same way. But personally, I love the guy. I think he's an outstanding coach. He would be on my short list. Maybe at the top a bit of coaches I'd want Notre Dame to take a look at if Marcus Freeman ever left. I think the guy who's won everywhere he's been archetype, it just really works in college football right now. A lot of guys have proved that. Cignetti has gone say what you will about the schedule. He's gone 11-1 in the Big Ten with a roster largely comprised of Group of 5 transfers. So that's a fantastic coaching job. He should win National Coach of the Year. It shouldn't be close, and it will be. I think there's definitely going to be mutual respect between Freeman and Cignetti this game.
Absolutely.
Clinton, anything else you wanted to touch on before we get to keys to the game?
No, let's do keys. And if Jack is willing to give us his actual score prediction, I'd love to hear it.
3 keys to the game, Jack. 3 things that need to happen for Notre Dame to emerge from this game victorious.
This is an article I write each week, but I haven't really thought of the keys yet. But I did say keys to the playoff run. So I wrote that Sunday morning. So I'll roll with those. So number one, I think unleash Riley Leonard. They definitely put a leash on how much they ran him the second half of the season, because he got good enough as a passer where they didn't need to in order to win the game, and also to preserve him because Riley Leonard is someone who runs without any regard for his own health or safety. We asked Mike Denbrock after the Army game, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I absolutely love seeing my quarterback with 0 feet on the ground and his head barreling towards the field, and he's trying to jump over the 3 defensive linemen at the goal line, and let's enough of that." But Riley's gonna be Riley. He's gonna run with reckless abandon. But now there's less to save him for. There's nothing to save him for right now. So unleash Riley Leonard. His legs are one of the biggest advantages Notre Dame will have over any other team, particularly Indiana against a quarterback who has had a great season but bit of a statue out in that pocket. So Riley's got to be the hero. I think even moving forward, if Notre Dame gets past Indiana, you look at the quarterbacks Georgia has struggled with. Jalen Milroe, 100 rushing yards. Haynes King, 100 rushing yards. It's a pattern there, then one that Notre Dame can take advantage of. The second thing, I touched on this earlier, Cross and Mills have to dominate, not just play well, dominate, be at their absolute best. And their absolute best is 2 of the 10 best defensive tackles in college football. They've been a little bit up and down. Mills has been one of the best DTs in the country the second half of the season. Got off to a bit of a slow start, but he's been fantastic. Cross obviously was hurt, but he's been Howard Cross. He's been great. Those 2 need to completely dominate. And the third one, again, I touched on it earlier, play with nothing to lose. If Notre Dame plays the way they've been playing over the past 10 games, they're going to beat this Indiana team, and I feel pretty confident with that.
And then other side of that coin, is there a matchup or something that you look at in this game that has you saying, I don't like how Notre Dame matches up with this, and I could see this as Indiana's path to victory?
If the Christian Gray game against USC wasn't a one-off, I think it was. I think Christian Gray was my breakout player pick heading into the year. Everyone knew Jeremiyah Love was going to have a crazy season, but I wanted to be different, and I picked Christian Gray, which he has. He's earned the starting role. He's had a fantastic year, but I mean, obviously you saw what happened against USC. So, and Indiana kind of lives off those back shoulders, off those slants. That's a matchup that has me a little not concerned, but interested to see how Christian Gray responds. And again, I think he's a great player, but I'm just interested to see how he deals with what happened last time. Obviously, he dealt with it well in the moment, winning the game with that an incredible play on the pick 6. Another matchup that concerns me. Again, not concerned, more interested to see how it plays out, is is Kamara against Anthony Knapp, the left tackle, who's had a really good second half. He's improved every week. He's a great kid. He's one of the smartest, most well spoken freshmen you're gonna talk to. He's obviously got a bright future here. He's gonna play in the NFL at some point down the line. I don't know. It's probably gonna be at guard, but he's been a good tackle. But he hasn't faced a defensive lineman of this caliber since Ashton Gelati all the way back in September 28th. So I want to see how much help Notre Dame gives him on Kamara, but also just how he holds up.
Clinton, anything else from you?
No, I'm excited for this game. My son has his first little Christmas play on Friday night at 7:00 at the local church where he goes to preschool. So I have this game on record or set to record, and I will not be attentive to my phone until I can get in here and start this game fresh. So Ryan will be at the game, so no one will be sending me texts at least whining and complaining or jubilation text.
Will not be able to feel my fingers to text.
I will.
Hands in the
I
pockets.
should be safe from disruption, and I will start it afresh. Probably about 9:00. I'll be about an hour behind, but I can blitz through all the commercials. To at least it's not on Fox, so it won't be 4 or 5 hour long game.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I'm excited for this game too. And you wanted a score prediction? I picked 31-21 for a magazine, and I think that's what I'm sticking with. 31-21 Notre Dame.
Sounds good.
From your mouth to God's ears, sir. Well, Jack, thanks once again for joining us this evening. I'm not supposed to be biased, but I'm going to say hopefully we can have you on again at some point this playoff because we're talking about a deep playoff run. That would make me very happy. Thanks again for joining us, sir. Have a great evening. Clinton, thank you for actually taking some time for us tonight as well.
I'll try to be here tomorrow night too.
There you go, man. We will be back with you. What are we? 9:00 tomorrow, Clinton?
9 and 9:30.
9 and 9:30. We're talking SMU and Tennessee tomorrow, so a little bit of Southern flair on this podcast for the first time in forever. Should be fun. We're breaking down those games. Thanks everyone for taking some time to indulge us on the Battle of Indiana this evening. We will check back with you tomorrow night.
See you guys.
I don't think that was actually English. Whatever. I've been awake since 5:00.
Did you actually press stop? Because I haven't got the thing in the court. There it is.
Okay. No, it did this with Sammy too, and it made me refresh. And